Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. This first photo, showing Gavrilo Princip being arrested in Sarajevo, is a milestone that precedes World War I. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife on June 28, 1914, motivated by Gavrilo Princip's desire to unite the South Slavs and resentment against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, triggered a chain of reactions that led to the onset of the global conflict. In May 1916, the Grand Fleet, under the command of Admiral John Jellicoe, set out to meet the Imperial German Navy at the Battle of Jutland in the North Sea. This clash is one of the largest and most strategic naval engagements in history, involving dozens of warships and resulting in significant losses on both sides. Although inconclusive in terms of a decisive victory, the battle reinforced the British naval blockade of Germany, severely impacting German supplies and resources. In August 1914, German troops in formation occupied Brussels, the capital of Belgium, a city of great strategic and cultural importance. The occupation occurred amid rapid changes in borders, where control of key territories was essential for advancing military operations. The presence of German troops not only demonstrated military might, but also sent a clear message of domination. In 1918, Red Cross members were photographed sorting through the backpacks of dead and wounded soldiers in France. This work, often done during the quieter periods of the conflict, was essential for documenting casualties and communicating news to the soldiers' families. In this way, the Red Cross provided some comfort to families eagerly waiting for information. The Reims Cathedral in France is seen emitting smoke after a German bombing raid. Built over several centuries and completed in the 15th century, the cathedral was a site for the coronation of French kings and a symbol of national pride. Although it was not a military target, its proximity to the front lines made it vulnerable to attacks. The bombings aimed to undermine French morale and demonstrate the superiority of the advancing German forces. On the Western Front in France, an American soldier from the 1st Division is photographed throwing a hand grenade in combat. The 1st Division, known as the Big Red One, played a crucial role in several battles, providing fresh troops and resources to the Allied forces. The photograph was taken at one of the strategic points where the Allies were trying to repel enemy advances. German troops are seen operating a machine gun post in a trench along the Vistula River in Russia, a strategic location that was the site of intense fighting. Every advance and retreat could change the course of the battle. The trenches provided vital protection for the troops, and the well-equipped and organized Germans used the machine gun to keep the enemy at bay, creating a deadly barrier. In May 1915, the Lusitania set sail from New York to England on its final and tragic voyage. 6 days later, the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine off the coast of Ireland, resulting in the loss of 1,150 lives, including 114 Americans. The Lusitania was known for being one of the largest and fastest ships in the world at the time. On September 26, 1918, a U.S. Army 37 mm artillery team is seen in action in the Meuse-Argonne region of France. This offensive, in conjunction with Allied forces, aimed to break through German defenses. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was part of a series of coordinated attacks in the final months of the conflict, playing a crucial role in diminishing enemy resistance and setting the stage for the subsequent armistice. In September 1914, during the Battle of the Marne district in France was transformed into a desolate landscape of ruins and mud. The Allied forces managed to halt the German advance, marking the beginning of the long and grueling trench warfare. Despite the destruction, this battle not only prevented the occupation of Paris, but also solidified the front line that would endure for 4 years. During a battle in the Argonne forest, French troops are on lookout duty. Familiar with the terrain, the French soldiers used the vegetation for concealment and to set up ambushes against enemy forces. Constant vigilance was crucial for anticipating attacks and protecting the front lines. In 1917, the first troops of the American Expeditionary Force landed at the French port of Saint-Nazaire. The location was chosen as an entry point due to its port infrastructure, capable of accommodating the large number of troops and equipment. This landing marked the beginning of direct U.S. involvement in the war, bringing weapons and increased military power to the Allies. In 1917, the first 5,000 American soldiers arrived in England, marching across the historic Westminster Bridge in London. Their arrival came at a crucial moment when Allied armies were in need of reinforcements and morale, bringing new vigor and hope to forces exhausted by the prolonged conflict. Prussian soldiers in Berlin, about to head to the front, received flowers from a woman. The departure of loved ones for war brought an intense emotional burden to families, especially wives, mothers, and children. Nevertheless, mobilization to support the war effort became a part of civilian life. Communities organized support committees to send supplies and letters to soldiers at the front. People contributed donations and engaged in volunteer activities, such as caring for the wounded and supporting families who had lost their providers. U.S. Marines wearing gas masks respond to a chemical attack near Verdun, France. The introduction of chemical weapons in this war marked a grim advancement in military arsenal, ushering in a new era of chemical warfare. This necessitated adaptations in protective equipment such as the gas masks seen in the photo. Near Reims, France, a soldier with a gas mask around his neck bangs a frying pan to alert others to a gas attack. The fields around this city, marked by trenches and destruction, were frequently targeted by chemical attacks. With the advent of military innovations, including the use of toxic gases, soldiers developed improvised methods to warn each other of imminent dangers. German invading troops are seen rebuilding a bridge over the Meuse River in Belgium. The bridge had been sabotaged by Belgian forces to slow down the enemy advance. Gaining and consolidating control over crossing points like this were crucial for military operations, facilitating the movement of resources and reinforcements. A recruitment poster featuring Field Marshal Herbert Kitchener, pointing directly at the viewer with the phrase, "Your country needs you," became one of the most iconic visual symbols of the early 20th century. First appearing in the United Kingdom in 1914, its purpose was to encourage voluntary enlistment before conscription was introduced, addressing the growing need for military reinforcements. British troops run under intense fire in Cambrai, northern France. The offensive was notable for its extensive use of tanks on the battlefield, aiming to break through the German trench defenses in Cambrai, a region of strategic importance with a dense network of fortifications. Despite the initial success, British forces faced strong counterattacks, resulting in heavy casualties and a prolonged struggle for territorial dominance. A series of boats piled together formed an improvised bridge over the Scheldt River in Antwerp, Belgium. This emergency arrangement was a strategy to facilitate the rapid evacuation of the local population and armed forces due to the imminent threat of invasion by the German army. Australian troops disembark in Alexandria, Egypt on their way to Gallipoli. Alexandria served as a crucial transit point for Allied forces preparing to fight on the Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey. The campaign, which began on April 25, 1915, was one of the most significant military operations involving British Empire forces, including Australia and New Zealand. The soldiers were heading to the battlefield with the goal of controlling the Dardanelles sea route and opening a new front to weaken the Ottoman Empire, an ally of the Central Powers. The Cathedral of Ypres in Belgium was reduced to ruins after intense bombardments. The city, located in West Flanders, was a frequent battleground between Allied and German forces, enduring numerous battles and air raids. Hostilities peaked in 1917 during the Third Battle of Ypres, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele. A barbed wire field near Ancerville, France, reveals the desolate landscape of the conflict. Ancerville, due to its strategic position, was constantly contested by opposing forces fighting for territorial control. These barriers were designed to slow down the enemy advance and inflict heavy casualties. Barbed wire fences, often accompanied by trenches and other obstacles, were common along the front lines. especially in strategically important areas. Australian soldiers operate a heavy artillery gun during the Battle of the Somme, fought between July and November 1916. This conflict was one of the bloodiest of the war, marked by intense fighting and significant loss of life. The use of heavy weaponry was crucial for preparing the ground before troop attacks, destroying fortifications and weakening enemy defenses. A Belgian machine gun detachment is positioned near Halen, Belgium in August 1914. Accompanied by a draft dog to pull the ammunition cart, a common practice for transporting supplies, the soldiers prepare for combat. The Battle of Halen, also known as the Battle of the Silver Helmets due to the metal helmets worn by Belgian cavalry, was one of the first major battles of the conflict in Belgium and played a significant role in the Belgian resistance against the German invasion. Serbian soldiers take position against Austrian forces on Mount Cer. This event is part of the broader context of tensions between Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which were one of the factors leading to the outbreak of World War I. The Battle of Mount Cer, fought from August 15 to 24, 1914, was one of the first significant battles of the conflict and represented a major victory for the Serbian forces. German soldiers gather at an unknown location during Christmas 1914. Amid the brutality and chaos of the war, the date offered a brief respite, allowing combatants to experience a moment of normalcy and humanity. This period is especially remembered for the Christmas truce, when, along the Western Front, soldiers of different nationalities engaged in gestures of goodwill, such as exchanging gifts and playing football matches. Italian army soldiers watch from their shelters during the Battle of the Piave River in Italy. This clash, which took place from June 15 to 23, was crucial in shaping the course of events in the region. The Piave River, which gave the battle its name, served as a natural defensive line for the Italian troops, making it difficult for enemy forces to advance. In 1916, the German fleet, composed of battlecruisers, headed to the North Sea to confront the Grand Fleet of the British Navy at the Battle of Jutland. This decisive clash was expected to influence the course of the war at sea due to naval superiority. The Germans sought to challenge British naval dominance and alter the maritime power balance. Although the battle did not result in a clear victory for either side, it underscored the strategic importance of naval supremacy and confirmed the Grand Fleet's ability to maintain the naval blockade, significantly impacting the German war effort. In 1917, President Woodrow Wilson addressed a joint session of Congress in Washington requesting U.S. entry into World War I. This speech was one of the most significant moments of his presidency, where Wilson persuasively argued for the country's participation in the conflict. He positioned the United States as defenders of democracy and global peace, emphasizing the need for intervention to protect democratic principles and ensure global security. Members of the first group of recruits from New York line up in front of the barracks at Camp Upton in Yaphank, Long Island. They were part of the massive U.S. mobilization effort to enter the conflict. At Camp Upton, recruits received basic military training and prepared for active service, helping to form the units that would be sent to Europe. The first tank models were developed to overcome the stalemate of trench warfare and enhance troop mobility. These armored vehicles, initially based on agricultural vehicle designs, were equipped with tracks to navigate the uneven terrain of trenches and battlefields. Despite their technological limitations and mechanical issues, tanks represented a significant shift in warfare. French Captain Georges Guynemer poses in front of his downed aircraft in Pienne, France. A renowned pilot of the French Air Force, Guynemer was one of the most celebrated aces of aviation during the conflict. After an intense aerial battle, his aircraft sustained critical damage, forcing him to make an emergency landing in friendly territory. Guynemer escaped unharmed and was hailed as a hero by his compatriots. The battlefield of Verdun, devastated after one of the longest and bloodiest confrontations of the war, which took place between February and December 1916, shows a terrain deeply altered by intense artillery and continuous fighting, marked by deep craters. U.S. Army troops on watch in the trenches in France faced an extremely hostile and psychologically draining environment. Although the trenches, which extended over vast distances, served as protection against enemy fire, life in them was marked by severe conditions such as dirt, moisture, and the constant risk of artillery and chemical weapon attacks. In June 1917, shortly after the arrival of American forces in Europe, U.S. Army General John J. Pershing at Center inspects French troops in Boulogne, France. This inspection was not just a military formality, but also a symbolic act of the United States' commitment to its European allies. Smoke rises from buildings in Cambrai, France, after being bombed by German forces during the Battle of Cambrai. Located in northern France, the city became a critical point due to its strategic importance for German supply and communication lines. In this context, the Allied offensive, primarily led by British forces, aimed to break through enemy lines using a large concentration of tanks. In December 1914, the Royal Hotel in the coastal town of Scarborough in northern England was severely damaged following a bombardment, one of the first to hit British soil. On that day, the region did not expect to be targeted, as it was far from combat zones and lacked obvious military facilities. The bombardment of Scarborough, along with other attacks on coastal cities at the same time, created a sense of vulnerability among the civilian population. In the Kiel and Poel Mountains in German territory, German troops prepare an offensive with mine throwers. The operation, which occurred at a critical moment in the war, aimed to control areas that could alter the course of events. Mine throwers, a relatively new technology, allowed for attacking enemy fortifications from a distance, causing damage before direct contact. In France, American troops with bayonets climb over a sandbag revetment. The use of bayonets indicates the imminence of an attack or defensive action in close combat, typical of trench warfare. An abandoned tank and water-filled craters in St. Julien, Belgium, highlight the intensity of the fighting. Located in the Flanders region, St. Julien was the site of significant offensives, where warfare tactics evolved rapidly. In December 1917, British General Sir Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem following its capture by Allied forces led by the United Kingdom. This entry was carefully planned to avoid any connotations of a conquering triumph. Allenby dismounted from his horse and entered the city on foot, in respect for Jerusalem's historical and religious significance. In Nixonville, France, French soldiers transport troops and supplies, playing a crucial role on the Western Front. The town, like many other strategic points, was vital for the movement and supply of forces. Efficient transportation of men and materials was essential to ensure that units were well equipped and prepared for the demands of combat. A trench snakes through the village of Brabant-en-Meuse, near Verdun, France. What was once a peaceful locality has been transformed into a war zone due to the intense conflict. Like many other areas near the Western Front, Brabant-en-Meuse experienced profound changes to its landscape and daily life due to trench construction and the presence of troops. From Brussels, Belgian troops depart for Leuven, a strategic point on the Western Front. The Belgian forces needed to reinforce the area to protect Leuven from enemy advances, particularly those of the Germans. In addition to facing the enemy, the soldiers contended with adverse conditions, such as the weather and shortages of resources. During the Battle of Verdun, French soldiers operate a 75 mm gun, known as the 75. Developed and widely used by French forces, the 75 inches was essential due to its accuracy and high rate of fire. Designed for support in prolonged trench combat, it helped maintain pressure on enemy forces and defend the lines. The German submarine U-139 gained notoriety for its attack on the RMS Lusitania, which occurred on May 7, 1915. The attack resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,150 passengers and crew, including 114 American citizens. The sinking had a significant impact on public opinion and international relations, particularly due to the large number of civilians, including Americans, who lost their lives. In 1917, British soldiers march in formation back to Ypres, reinforcing the protection of the strategic city on the Western Front. Ypres had suffered heavily from bombardments and attacks, making this regrouping a crucial part of the ongoing defense. Indian troops arrive on French soil, ready for combat as part of the Indian Expeditionary Force. This deployment marked a crucial phase in the Allied war effort, reflecting the significant contribution of the British Empire. Despite the harsh conditions and the combat environment in Europe, Indian troops played a notable role in several battles. In a trench near Ypres, Belgium, Allied troops gather around a small campfire. The region became emblematic for its devastating methods of warfare, including the use of poison gases. The proximity to the front line turned life in the trenches into a constant struggle for survival, making each moment of calm like the one captured in the photo extremely cherished. After a weeks-long siege, German troops marched through the streets of Antwerp, Belgium, capturing the city. During the siege, Antwerp faced intense fighting and blockades, resulting in significant hardships for its residents. The German occupation profoundly altered the routine and living conditions in the city, leading to lasting consequences for the local population. In 1915, two Turkish soldiers take position in a trench in Gallipoli, Turkey. This moment is part of the Gallipoli campaign, which challenged both the Ottoman Empire and the Allies. The campaign aimed to capture Constantinople, secure a supply route to Russia, and establish a solid front against the Ottomans. Soldiers from the 18th Infantry, 1st Division of the U.S. Army, take a break in a devastated French town near Saint-Mihiel. The offensive, launched in September 1918, was one of the first major independent actions by the United States in the war and was crucial in pressing the enemy lines. A Turkish cannon being transported to the front line on the Gallipoli Peninsula illustrates the efforts to strengthen the defenses of the Ottoman forces. The peninsula, site of intense fighting, required constant resupply and replacement of armament to face the Allied offensive. On May 28, 1918, the 28th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Division of the U.S. Army advances over a trench during the Battle of Cantigny in France. This offensive was part of a broader effort to regain territory from the German forces and relieve pressure on the French troops. The operation at Cantigny served as a crucial test for the newly arrived American troops. German reserves being transported to the front line in trucks illustrate the importance of rapid and effective mobilization during the conflict. The agility in moving troops and materials was crucial for responding to changes on the battlefield and sustaining military operations, ensuring that frontline units received the necessary support. In 1916, General Sir Sam Hughes, then Canadian Minister of Defense, and other observers are seen examining the wreckage in Arras, France. Hughes visited the area to assess the impact of the war and the conditions of Canadian troops. The visible devastation in Arras highlights the high human and material cost of the conflict. Wounded soldiers are being transported to an ambulance during the Allied advance on the city of Lens. Located in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region of France, Lens became a strategic point in military operations. The capture or defense of the city often resulted in high casualties due to the harsh conditions in the trenches and battlefields. In late October 1917, French troops take cover in a shell hole during the offensive that led to the recapture of the Chemin des Dames in France. After months of intense fighting and heavy casualties, the French forces finally regained this vital strategic position. The Chemin des Dames, an important ridge in northern France, had been the site of fierce clashes and frequent changes of control between opposing forces. In mid-August 1914, German army troops receive rations from a field supply vehicle while advancing toward Brussels. The German strategy included a vigorous offensive to secure the rapid occupation of the city, considered a crucial strategic point for subsequent advances. In March 1918, soldiers from Company K, 165th Infantry of the 69th Combat Regiment, marched through Saint Clement, France. Part of the Old Rainbow Division, known for its strategic operations, this group played a significant role in the fighting. St. Clement became a key strategic point for many troops en route to the front lines. After capturing Belgrade on October 9, 1915, Austrian troops positioned themselves strategically along the Danube River. Belgrade, a vital point in the Balkan region, became the scene of intense clashes. The occupation of the city was part of a series of offensives aimed at destabilizing and controlling Serbia, whose alliance with the Allies was seen as a direct threat to the interests of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Soldiers from the 27th Division of the United States advanced through a field tangled with barbed wire near Beaucaire, in the Somme region of France. The area was the site of intense fighting and frequent engagements between Allied forces and the Central Powers. After the signing of the armistice at the end of 1918, American troops celebrate the end of hostilities. Exhausted from long periods of combat, the soldiers express relief and gratitude. With the end of the devastating conflict in sight, these men are about to leave the battlefields behind and reflect on the new beginning that peace promises. In November 1918, American soldiers from New York set up a Liberty Bell in Cambrai, France, to celebrate the armistice. The Liberty Bell symbolizes the end of hostilities and the hope for a peaceful future. Cambrai, which had been the site of brutal battles, became a place of celebration after the signing of the armistice. On November 11, 1918, a crowd gathers in front of Buckingham Palace in London to celebrate the signing of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice brought immense relief after more than 4 years of war, marking the return of peace and the hope for a new beginning. Foot soldiers follow the passage of a tank heading toward Juvigny, France, at a time when tanks were still a recent innovation on the battlefield. Designed to breach defensive lines more effectively than traditional infantry, these heavy vehicles were used to support French troops facing strong enemy resistance. Soldiers gather at a military funeral to pay respects to the victims of a German air raid, including 2 Canadian nurses. This attack, like many others, aimed to undermine the morale and operational capacity of the Allied forces, highlighting the cruelty of targeting not only armed combatants, but also medical personnel whose mission was to save lives. Between 1914 and 1918, such ceremonies became painfully common. A group of Allied soldiers gathers in a crater caused by an explosion, sharing a meal in France. During the turbulent years of the conflict that shook the world in the early 20th century, moments of respite were rare and precious for the combatants.